Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Career Evangelist Podcast. Another guest we have on the show today, she's advised the U.S. Department of Labor. She has written for the Wall Street Journal. Literally, she wrote a book on the future of work multiple times. She's a futurist, best-selling author, and the person every smart professional should be listening to right now. So, guys, get ready because we have Alexandra Levit in the building.
Hi, Bola. How are you?
With us today. So, Alexandra, it's good to have you join us on the Career Evangelist podcast today. We'll be talking about the future of work because I know you are passionate about that topic. So, can you tell us what you do so that my listeners can get to know you better?
Sure. A workforce futurist is kind of a space age sounding job title, but all it really means is that I work with organizations in both the public and the private sector, as well as individuals, to try to ascertain what are the biggest potential disruptions that will occur, in anywhere from a 2 year to a 15-year time horizon, so that we can develop strategies to be better prepared. And in the world of strategic foresight, which is my area of study, we see that patterns from the past do tend to repeat themselves. So we can learn a lot from what's happened previously in similar types of situations. What I do isn't rocket science. It's really just trying to identify those patterns and bring them forward so that we can make an educated determination about what we need to do next. And of course, it depends on whether I'm advising a leader or advising an employee, sometimes what the advice is. But I think it's critical that we continue to be proactive instead of reactive. Now things are changing so quickly that it really does behoove us to be more agile in general, not just, well, we have to respond to this fire and then we have to respond to that fire. It's like, well, how can we have an attitude that is really helpful for the pace of change that we're currently experiencing? So that's what I work on. My job has many different components. You mentioned the writing. I also do a lot of research, and that's both quantitative and qualitative research in order to inform what otherwise might be designated as my opinion. I like to make sure that it's grounded in what real people are actually doing and what real leaders are doing. And I do have a bunch of books that I speak about publicly and on wonderful outlets like the Career Evangelist Podcast. And so it's really great to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
It's awesome. Thank you for coming. So, my daughter, she's in college right now, and
Mhm.
you wrote the book, They Don't Teach Corporate in College.
Yes.
So, what's the career lesson you wish someone had warned you about when you were starting out? I want the upcoming generation to learn from that advice.
Well, I'm so glad you asked this because that book originally came out 22 years ago, if you can believe it. And I was in my mid 20s when I published it. And at the time, the reason I published it was simply because in my early career in New York City, I had been one of those high achieving students that thought I could go out into the business world and become a VP by the age of 30, no problem. And my first several jobs crashed and burned. And so I decided that someone should clue in other 20 somethings on what they needed to do to be successful in the world of work after I finally figured it out. It took me several years. And that was how the book came about. They don't teach corporate in college. And one of the first things I talked about in it was the hardest lesson that I had to learn, which is that it's not really about what you do. It's about how people perceive what you do and how they perceive the contributions that you are making. And you can be the hardest worker of all time. And it doesn't matter if people don't like you, if they don't understand what you're doing, if they don't respect you. And I think that's especially important now. It was important back then, in 2004, of course. But right now we have the situation where a lot of people are working, including Gen Zers who new graduates, are working in distributed environments, meaning they are not side by side with their manager or their team on an everyday basis, which makes it very difficult to assimilate and learn the things you need to learn in order to make that kind of positive impression on people. I think we have put our young people in a very difficult position because we are expecting them to make themselves known and to make their contributions known without an infrastructure that's supportive of doing that. So I think there's two kind of ideas here. One is that the young people still need to do it. They still need to figure out, okay, well, how do I make my contributions more visible and how do I ensure I have a good reputation on my team? And also, leaders need to recognize how difficult this is in a distributed work environment and make sure that they are actually taking the time and resources to give those young people the face time, the exposure that they really need in order to make this effective transition.
Oh, I like that. So you talked about perception. Are
Mhm.
there ways that we can shape the perception of maybe how people feel about us, whether we are in co-located in the same office building or whether we are in this distributed environment that you spoke about?
I think you have to be very purposeful about it, and more so than ever before. When I first wrote the very first edition of They Don't Teach Corporate in College, it was kind of a given that you would be meeting with your manager weekly, that you would be in team meetings in person, and you would have an opportunity. And that is not necessarily the case anymore. In fact, I've seen situations where Gen Zers might go to an office and they might be the only person there and they might be working with people all around the world. And sometimes they have Zoom meetings and sometimes they don't. Sometimes work is completely asynchronous, which is helpful from a flexibility standpoint. But I think from an assimilation standpoint, it's difficult. So, what you have to be doing as a young person is you have to be scheduling those meetings, even if they're Zoom meetings, one on one informational type, like I just want to learn more about what you do. I have these questions about it. If you are ever coming to town or I am, if we could get together for lunch sometime, if I could meet you in the office, that kind of thing. Yeah, you have to take the ownership of that because much as I would love to tell every manager that they should be doing that, that doesn't always happen. And as a young person, I think that you can go out of your way and not just the people that you work immediately with, but I think meeting with people in other functions is also a really smart thing to do because one thing that we see as a trend in the world of work is that people are becoming more broadly skilled. So in the past, it was like you learned one thing and you just did it for your whole career. And now we don't even really know what we're going to need 5 years from now. So therefore, being able to do a lot of different things within an organization is very, very strategically important for young people. And so if you're in marketing, for example, like go learn about finance, go learn about sales, and set up those meetings so it has both a networking component and a skill acquisition component.
That's so good. So you have this work-based learning framework. Can you
Mhm.
tell us more about that so that my audience will know more about what that exactly means?
Absolutely. So, work-based learning is exactly what it sounds like. It's learning by working in a very immersive, real-world type of environment. And I started working with GPS Education Partners on the Make School Workbook because I was looking for a solution to what I consider to be an age-old problem of we have all of these open positions that go unfilled for months or even years at a time. And yet we still somehow have new college grads that are unemployed. And it just, things have not matched up in the way that they've needed to. And so work-based learning offered at the secondary school level to me is a really critical solution because what we do is we expose young people to different types of careers. They can learn what they like, what they don't like. They can get that critical work experience that teaches them some of those skills we were talking about at the very beginning. So, how to make a good first impression, how to be effective in a work environment that if they didn't have that exposure at the age of 16 or 17, they might not get that exposure until they're 22 or 23 years old. And it's a really, really great idea to showcase that early. And I think the key thing in Make School Work that we talk about with work-based learning is that, and one of my colleagues, Steph Locke, says that we want to avoid I just love this, random acts of work-based learning, meaning like, oh, well, let's, to have a couple students do a shadow day, or let's give them a tour of the factory. And that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about them actually having a role on a factory floor where they are working for a supervisor. They are accomplishing very specific goals. The learning is authentic and it's tied to what they are studying in school. The curriculum is associated with what they're doing. It's not this isolated experience. And when they come out, they can do whatever they want. That's the beauty of it. Either they can proceed to a four-year university, or they can decide they're making good money and they can pipeline directly into a skilled trade. But they have options and they have knowledge of what the different opportunities are. So they can make a smart first step. Because I think what we do in society, at least in American society now, is that we just say everyone should go for a four-year degree at the age of 18. And what that's resulting in now is that we have all of these college grads who are unemployed because we're seeing the bottom drop out a bit from that professional knowledge worker entry level path. And I'm not going to sit here and say whether that's right or wrong. That could be a whole other episode of this. But that is happening. And so what we need to be doing is exposing our young people to the jobs that are actually available for them that will allow them to make a family sustaining wage, meaning that they can support themselves at the age of 18 or 19 years old. And that is, I think, a really, really valuable service that work-based learning provides. Even if you don't work for that exact company, you might work for a similar company. Or even if you go to college, you might have that concrete work experience so that you can get your first internship. And it really sets you on your way in a way that I don't think traditional secondary school education does.
I thank you, Alexandra, for talking about this work-based learning, and I want to drill down a little bit more because
Sure.
I think many people will benefit from this. This is about acquiring skills, knowledge,
Mhm.
experience, even from a very young age. So, how are you enrolling students? Are you partnering with high schools,
Mhm.
or how does it work? What's the process like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I should be transparent with the listeners that I don't personally do this. I just like the concept. I like the idea. I like the approach that GPS Education Partners has taken. I think it's scalable, it's workable. And so I'm out there saying this is what we should be doing. But I'm not involved in the process myself. So what GPS Education Partners does that is so critically important is they serve as a convener, meaning that they have relationships with all of the different stakeholders. So that is policymakers, community organizations, employers, and schools, and even parents to a certain degree, because we know how influential parents can be. And they get everyone together to work toward a common goal in the community of exposing young people to more types of careers at a younger age. And they form individual partnerships, for example, between a school district and an employer that might be local. And it really is, when done correctly, a win-win for everyone because the employers are inevitably facing some kind of skilled labor shortage, especially if they are in fields like healthcare and manufacturing, where they just can't get people fast enough. They have kind of that automatic local pipeline of people. And again, even if it's not those exact people, that exposure in the community leads them to get maybe people from other sources that can be filling those open positions. So it's a win for the employer in that way. It's also a win for an employer, and I like this point a lot. It's something that's in the book that I don't think we talk about too much in interviews, but I love the experience it gives to current employees of the organization because they have an opportunity to take young people under their wing
Yeah.
and really make a difference in those young people's lives. And at a time when we see disengagement in the workforce to be at the highest level it has ever been, I think for employers to realize like this is something that keeps your current employees really engaged if you're doing it right. And so that's a kind of a side benefit that we don't often think about. So much employers are like, oh, this is just a pain for my employees to have to supervise a young person. But if it's set up correctly, they actually get a lot out of it. For the schools, this is not super easy for schools to do. I mean, there's things that have to be taken into consideration, like how are the kids going to get to a site? How's it going to work with the curriculum that they already have? And it does take some ingenuity and willingness to do things a little bit different. But I think that they win in the end because their graduates are more prepared. And how this started originally was that young people who were not so academically savvy that may have been in danger of graduating, for example, when they did work-based learning, that kind of saved them and allowed them to have a path to graduation and to a career afterward. But what we've seen with work-based learning is that it doesn't have to be limited to kids who are struggling academically, that all kinds of kids benefit from this. So having a program that's a little bit wider in scope that you can offer to anyone who wants it is a really good move. But this does take coordination, and it takes everybody being on the same page and working toward a common goal because these stakeholders don't always have the same objectives and look at things in the same way. In fact, they often speak very different languages. So one of the roles of the convener is just to get everybody working toward that common goal. And that is probably the piece of this that's the linchpin. Because I think anyone can say, oh, it's a great idea to have work-based learning, but actually getting it executed with all of the different partners involved is challenging. And so I think working with an organization that's already done this a bunch of times is a really good move. And that's why I work with GPS education partners when I'm like trying to recommend this because I don't know how to do this either. So I rely on them, and they've been doing it for 25 years. So tens of thousands of students have gone through their program. It's mostly centered here in the Midwest right now, but it's poised to grow nationally. And I think for the US in general, this would be a really good idea. They are a lot better at this in Europe, by the way. Work-based learning is more institutionalized, it's more accepted, it's more appreciated. I think we can learn a lot from Europe and learn a lot from what we've done here in the Midwest with work-based learning.
I like the concept, and I think it's going to benefit a lot of people if it can get all over the country, right? So
Mhm.
let's talk about the future, the future of work. And
Okay.
there's no way we are going to talk about the future of work without mentioning artificial intelligence. So,
Yes.
Alexandra, in your opinion, what's the biggest misconception that workers are having about AI taking their job right now?
I mean, first of all, I do want to be honest here, and say that the concern is valid. Um, I mean, in my ivory tower, pie in the sky world, I would like to say that anytime we have had a technology revolution, there's actually been more jobs created than destroyed. And I think if we are implementing AI the way we should, and effectively in a way that will actually result in productivity increases, we will, in fact, expand the number of jobs and the types of jobs that are available. Because instead of building the widget yourself, you will have to design, manage, fix, redeploy, and explain how the technology that's now building that widget works. So that's theoretically a lot of jobs that would be created.
Mhm.
We are not seeing that at the moment. Instead, what we are seeing is what I have termed blunt force automation, which refers to companies just saying, I'm going to lay off a huge swath of my workforce and I'm going to automate everything. Now, I don't think this is a permanent situation. I think it's going to have so much backlash at a certain point that we will go back to hiring people. But it's not unreasonable for those working in today's environment to be concerned for their jobs. And so, what I like to tell people they should do is get ahead of it. And this is, by the way, everyone. So this is entry level people, this is senior level people, this is people who have been in a field or an industry for 30 years. It doesn't really matter who you are or what you do. You need to be looking at the skills that are most vulnerable to automation that you have. And then you need to be looking at the adjacent skills that can't really be automated or won't really be automated anytime in the near future, and make a plan for adopting those skills. And I like to give this very, very simple example of this. I write for the Wall Street Journal, or I have. And if I look at that job, the writing of the column can be automated. That's already possible with generative AI. So if I want to continue to meaningfully contribute to that process, I better look at the other skills that are necessary for the production of that column. And those are things like sensitive source interviewing. There are certain sources that will not talk to an AI, will not do an interview via email. They will only talk to a person they can trust, who will understand the nuances of what they are saying. That's going to be done by a human for the foreseeable future. So having those interviewing skills. Another one is editing. I didn't know how to edit, but the Wall Street Journal is not going to allow something written by AI to go out without human eyes on it. That would be a very, very bad decision, and they know that. So being the editor of that column is another way that I could go. And so this is the type of thing that everybody needs to be doing when we talk about career growth and future-proofing your career, looking at those adjacent skills and making plans for how you're going to adapt when certain parts of your job are automated. Because otherwise, I think you're going to end up being reactive, and your company's going to tell you, like, we're now automating all of this and you're not part of the process. And that's when you become vulnerable to being laid off as a result of this. And I don't think it has to happen. I don't think this is inevitable for all knowledge workers, for example. I do think that people who are smart about this will continue to be gainfully employed for the years to come. This is not inevitable. I already said that, but I want to repeat it again because I do think there are things that we can be doing to be proactive.
I like the way you put it. We all should do what I'll call skill audit. We should
Yep,
find
great.
out what skills AI can eliminate, and we should look for adjacent skills that can help us to continue to grow and be relevant in the career space. So thank you for sharing that. Now, Alexandra, you wrote a book,
Mhm.
Make School Work.
Yep.
Uh, so when you say make school work, that means there are certain things that are
Mhm.
fundamentally broken about our education system today. So what are those things that you think are not working today, in terms of the education system in the United States?
Yeah, it's a great question. And by the way, I didn't come up with that super savvy title. Um, I can't take credit for it, but it's a wonderful title. It really just does say it all. I think what's broken is the system of having an education that adequately prepares you for the next step of work. Um, what we tend to teach are esoteric subjects that may not have any material benefit for what we will do for a living. And we, especially at the secondary school level, we kind of kick the can down the road and say, well, a kid will go to a four-year college and they'll get specific job training there. When we know from when I was writing They Don't Teach Corporate in College, that doesn't really happen either. So we keep on leaving it to other people to give young people the skills that they need to be career ready and work ready. And what we need to be doing is taking more responsibility at an earlier point in a student's life for exposing them to different sorts of opportunities and different ways that they can acquire skills beyond just like that typical academic purview that we sort of make everybody follow, regardless of whether it works for them or not, whether they want to do anything that's related to those academics. I think that we are just too narrowly focused in our current education system, and we're seeing that it's just not working because we still have all of these unemployed college grads, we still have all of these open positions, so we are not closing the gap between the open positions and the people available to fill those positions. And I think that should be part of the charter of education is doing that. It's ascertaining what are the jobs that are out there and how can we train young people to take them. And we're just not doing that at the moment. And so something has to change. Now, the problem is we have a very, very highly institutionalized education system here in the US. And it's like a giant behemoth that it's difficult to steer a huge ship around. And so I think this does have to happen community by community. I don't think this is something that overnight it's going to be like, the federal government comes in and says, like, we're going to do work-based learning all across the board. Like, yeah, you have to be the change you want to see. And so you have to do it in your environment first and make the difference there. And I do think that that is more than feasible if you have the right partnerships and you have the right mindset.
So good. Thank you. So, Alexandra, you've written for the New York Times, Forbes, Fortune magazine, and the Atlantic. How did you build this level of media credibility, I should say, and can anyone replicate it?
Hmm, It's a great question. I think it's time. People don't tend to want to hear that, but being in a space for a long time and having longevity with the types of content that you are writing is pretty critical to having that presence and being trusted. Because once you're trusted in one outlet that's prestigious, you'll be trusted in other outlets. And I do think it's possible for anyone to build a platform like I have. In fact, the barrier to entry has never been lower because there's so many new opportunities to publish things. You can publish things on Substack, on your own site. You can be a contributor to different publications in your industry. Um, you can be exposed to different types of speaking engagements. I mean, social media has really allowed people to be elevated into in the influencer category in a way that just wasn't possible for the average person 20 years ago. So I do think it is possible, but I think what most people get wrong is they want it to happen immediately, and it's the kind of thing that truly does take time. And just to illustrate how much time, sometimes when I'm writing something, AI will say that that I've used AI to write it, and I'll click on the source, and the source will be myself, something that I've previously written. And that's how long I've been in this area where the AI models have been trained on my content. And that's something that you can't speed that up. Like it's just going to take time and perseverance and kind of staying in the same area. And of course, learning from, you don't want to be saying the same thing you said 10 years ago, but um, just being willing to kind of explore new ideas, being willing to, I revisit past forecasts that I made all the time, and I tell people, some of them were accurate and some of them weren't. Let me tell you the ones that were accurate and the ones that weren't, and being willing to listen to what other people have to say if they have different perspective, and shift your own so that you can evolve with the times.
That's so good. I think you are spot on there. People do not necessarily want to go through the process. They
Mhm.
want the results, but the pain, the grind that we build the character to get to that level of credibility is not
Yep.
what people are willing to do. Now, as we are wrapping it, we want to hear from you in terms of career advice, so that somebody that is listening to us can take this advice and action it. So, what's the career advice you wish people will stop giving, and
Stop
what?
giving.
Yes, and what should replace it?
I am not a big fan of, and I talked about this in a book that I published in 2011. It was the number one business myth that I hate. And that's do what you love and the money will follow. This is just not true. And there's so many reasons why you might not want to do what you love for a living. The money is one part of it, but also it can kill your passion for what you love when you have to deal with the business aspects of it. Um, I think what you want to do instead is you want to find something that you like well enough that can allow you to be marketable in the business world. And I tell this to my own kids. My daughter is really interested in theater. She's an actress, and I'm kind of pushing her into more the business of theater. So the producer, the director, the casting of human entertainment, because I do think that will continue. That's not going to be something that's going to be fully automated. They're still going to need people to produce this stuff, even if some of the talent is AI. We're gonna rely on people to understand what makes other people tick. So I'm pushing her that way. My son, who wants to be an aerospace engineer, I'm like, okay, well, this is the part where I wish work-based learning was available to him, because like, let's understand what that actually means if you enjoy it well enough to have a career in it, or if there's something that is engineering related that you like a little bit better that can infuse your love of other things, for example. So it's not that you have to hate your job. It's just that I think you want to be more measured in what you're expecting out of your job. There's a reason it's called work and not fun.
Yeah.
Um, there is going to be aspects of every job that you don't like.
Mhm.
And that's just being a grown up, and we all have to deal with that. I mean, I'll be transparent. I don't like the accounting aspect of having my own business. In fact, I loathe it. But if I want to have my own business, I have to do it, and I have to know how to do it well. So that's what everybody who's wants to chase their passion should think about. It's very pragmatic advice, and I know it's not the sexiest, but it's truly what I believe.
No, it's good. Thank you very much for being candid with us.
You're welcome.
This is what we need.
Mhm.
Finally, Alexandra, where can my audience find you so that they can connect with you and continue this journey with you?
Absolutely. So we have a great website with tons of resources that's called makeschoolwork.org. I can also be reached individually at alexandralevit.com. So that's Levit. And I am pretty active on LinkedIn. So I would love to connect with people there. I talk all about, and they don't teach corporate in college, how to network with people. And so if members of your audience are taking that stuff to heart and they want to network, I'll always be open to that kind of thing because, after all, it is my own advice that I should follow.
Absolutely. So networking is great. So
Mhm.
I will connect with you so that
Mhm.
we can continue this network. Thank you for showing up. You have shared tons of valuable information with us, and I'm sure my audience, they will find all this very beneficial. Thank you, Alexandra.
Sounds great. Thanks, Bola. Appreciate it.
All right.